Welcome everyone to Meditation Mount. And we're gathered from different parts of the world. And let's begin as we normally do by making sure that we are connected. We already are connected at the deepest levels of soul, but let us consciously connect. And let's do this by bringing ourselves, first of all, to a point of inner stillness. By taking a few deep, gentle breaths, making sure that our physical body is free of all tension and relaxed. That our emotional body is calm. And that our mind is clear and open and serene. And then let us stand inside our own heart, feeling the beating of the heart as it pumps the lifeblood around our own living system that we call self. And at the center of our heart, there burns the fire of love, the eternal flame that lives inside each one of us. Let's visualize each heart on this call being connected by a line of loving light that we send out from our heart to heart, to heart, to heart, weaving together a matrix that is the communion that is our beloved community for today. And let us stand together in this group heart. Thank you, everyone. Well, the world has changed since we last met. We've entered a whole new era of possibilities. And what we're realizing is it's up to us to determine what happens moving forward. These are transformative times. There are intense energies playing upon the earth. And what I'd like to do is show you the Schumann resonance reading taken a couple of hours ago, just so you get a look at what it looks like. So, as you can see, on the right-hand side, we have some intense magnetic weather going on at the moment. This is neither good nor bad. It's just we are in transformative times. We are in intense, energetic times. And when we stand in these times, we have an opportunity to utilize the energy that's present. And like Aikido, we move it to the advantage of the good. And so today, I wanted to focus this view from the Mount on the theme of a synthesis of nations, the deep work of piecing things together. And as you know, each broadcast is different. Sometimes we don't show any images, or no charts, no slides. We have meditations. Today's going to be a combination. I've actually created more materials than I normally would. It just felt right to do that. And these materials will go through, we'll ponder them, we'll meditate on them, we'll explore them, so we can get a deeper sense of what's happening. And one of the, if you like, the overlighting presences that'll be guiding us today and that was guiding me in the preparation of this broadcast is the founder of Meditation Mount, Dr. Roberto Assagioli. He was the inspiration and guiding light behind Meditation Mount and other centers of creative meditation around the world. And as some of you know, he was also the founder of a spiritual psychology known as Psychosynthesis, because his job was synthesis. And he held the vision of a harmonious world resulting from a synthesis of all the nations, with each nation, like each human being, having a soul and having a personality. And let me say that the deep reason for embarking on a process of developing and refining the earthly vehicle that we call the personality, the Michael, the Janes, the Peters, the Matildas, whatever name we give to this personality, it's so that the personality can become a clear instrument of expression for the gifts of the soul. And this takes a while to build up. It may take lifetimes to build up a vehicle that can do justice to who we are. And we talked about the deep work of piecing things together. My sense is that we are at peace when our lives become immersed in a deeper dimension of meaning and belonging as we move from self-centeredness to serving the common good. I'm sure that, like me, on those occasions when we're aware of falling short of this intended goal of living a soul-inspired life, it's because our behaviors may have been conditioned by the pain and distortion of past patterns. And these can interfere with the expression of the higher aspects of ourself. These higher aspects are the characteristics of our divine nature. And just to remind ourselves that here at Meditation Mount, one of the three principles that we work with is essential divinity, saying that inside of each person, each aspect of creation, there is a spark of the Creator. Therefore, we respect all life. All life is sacred. And the second principle is goodwill, which is love in action, with love being the currency and lifeblood of all relationship. And then the third principle, as you know from previous broadcasts, is unanimity, that we're part of this one seamless web of life. And in an ideal world, when essential divinity, goodwill, and unanimity are the foundations upon which we built our society, we would not be bombing each other. We would not be shouting at each other. We would not be killing each other. We would not be killing nature. We would be living in right relationship. However, in order to get to that point, a lot of work needs to be done on refining the personality, which if you like, is the earthly agent of the soul. So it's a task that we have in front of us. So let me just say that at this time of global unrest and unraveling, let our earnest desire be, may we fall into peace and not fall into pieces as a world. So I'd like to begin our exploration today by reflecting on the words of Roberto Assagioli, which were written 60 years ago, about the task of bringing synthesis or greater wholeness to both the individual and the nation, as well as the global family of nations, because we're talking about a synthesis of nations as the ultimate goal, as the ultimate prize. So let's see what Roberto wrote. I've called this the yoga of synthesis. It's interesting for those of you who are familiar with Agni Yoga. Agni Yoga is the yoga of fire, but it is also called the yoga of synthesis. So let's focus on the contribution that Roberto Assagioli has given to the world. Psychosynthesis is a spiritual psychology that honors the whole person and seeks to align and integrate the multidimensional levels of self, bringing soul and personality into a greater resonant relationship so that more of the innate and unique gifts that constitute the essential nature of each person can be experienced and expressed. Psychosynthesis sees the evolution of consciousness and the goal of life as a progressive journey into greater states of wholeness and greater states of self-realization. So we will be beginning our journey with that. And when you apply psychosynthesis to the global picture, we have this vision of a synthesis of natures that Dr. Roberto Assagioli held so dearly. The psychosynthesis of each nation must precede that between the nations, just as the psychosynthesis of the individual must precede the harmonious integration into the various human groups. Disharmonious individuals cannot form harmonic groups, and the same is true of nations. This does not require demonstration. Okay, so let's ponder on this. Let's just take a break. What we're saying is that each of us needs to work on bringing the different parts of ourselves into wholeness. All the dismembered aspects of our body, psychological body, our emotional body, our mental body, and creating a state of wholeness. Because it's only through wholeness that something can enter into this realm of time and space, into this earth. So the blessings of the soul need an agent of blessing, and the personality, particularly the soul-inspired personality, is the agent of that blessing. So this is a tough assignment, and this was written 60 years ago. I'm going to read what Roberto put forward as the task, as well as some of the challenges. So let's read this together and ponder on it. Psychosynthesis between nations is an urgent need. As there is no isolated individual detached from his close and multiple relationships with other individuals and human groups, so there are no isolated and self-sufficient nations. But psychosynthesis between nations presents great difficulties, the same that hinder cooperation between individuals. In addition to the general ones, there are those deriving from the still backward psychological evolutionary stage of the national entities. So take this in. So he's laying out, if you like, the curriculum that we're going to be exploring today. One of the greatest difficulties for the harmonious synthesis between nations, indeed one of the greatest dangers that threaten world peace, is the strong tendency towards self-affirmation and the consequent aggressiveness. The most effective means to use towards this is its transformation and sublimation from material and hostile self-affirmation into psychological and spiritual self-affirmation. And he says a nation can fully satisfy its desire for prestige completely independently of the size of its territory, its military strength, and its material resources, that is, through the specific contributions that it can and wants to make to the formation of the new civilization and the new world culture that is already underway. A nation, even a small one, and materially weak, can assert itself and receive respect and appreciation from others for what it can contribute to the common human heritage, that is, with the mission it can take on and carry out. The fact that each nation has or may have a special mission has been recognized and affirmed also in the past. One of the most fervent and enlightened proponents was Giuseppe Mazzini, who over a century ago intuited with admirable clairvoyance other characteristics of the future world civilization, such as sociality, cooperation, and, in the political field, continental groupings. So you've got the European Union, you've got the United States, you've got different groupings that have formed around the world. The mission is inspired by the national soul. From it can come the recognition of the mission and the urge to carry it out, just as from the spiritual self comes the light and strength to us to carry out our own task, our own individual mission. So let's digest that. So what Roberto Assagioli is showing us is that it doesn't matter what scale you're talking about, whether it's an individual or it's a community or it's a nation, it's the same process. It's the process of integration and alignment to a greater purpose. So for us as individuals, it's healing ourselves, it's bringing ourselves to a point of wholeness, aligning with the soul, and then coming into resonance with the soul so we can bring our gifts to the world so that our life is a positive contribution. And the same with a nation. And then same with the human family. Because remember, the human family is part of the planetary body and the planetary destiny. So it doesn't really matter what level you're talking about. It's all scaled. It's all a process of creating wholeness. And as we saw earlier, psychosynthesis sees life as a progressive journey into greater states of wholeness. So when I achieve a state of wholeness and can, if you like, express more of the truth inside of me, it's not everything. It's a partial wholeness. It's a partial synthesis. And then I work on creating a greater synthesis, a greater wholeness. And the greater the wholeness, the more of the gift of the soul can pour through. And so Roberto's vision of a synthesis of nations really is the coming together of all the souls of the world to form this wonderful mosaic, this wonderful collective personality that can give birth and express the soul of humanity. And as we've said before, this may take hundreds of years or thousands of years, and yet we have to start the journey now. There is a tipping point. I think we've mentioned this in other broadcasts. We talk about moving from self-centeredness to serving the common good, and that sounds, very idealistic or altruistic, but the tipping point is it's an energetic shift. So the tipping point happens when the locus of our life shifts from seeking to satisfy the separated self, and we enter that vital phase of serving the common good with our heart. Now, if I think of that in my own life, it's a huge shift. When I start being self-centered and I start thinking of others, I then actually, by my actions, enter a greater community because I'm not separated by my thoughts or my actions. And same with a nation. If a nation only sees itself as the biggest and the best in the world and wants to be the biggest and the best, it's very difficult for it to come into resonant relationship with other nations, regardless of their size. So this is where geographical size has nothing to do with it. It's the gift of each nation's soul that is wanting to flower in the garden of earth. That's what a synthesis of nations is. It's bringing all the flowers that represent the flowering of the soul of each nation and creating this incredible garden. So I mentioned the tipping point because at the moment, when the personality is in charge, and particularly a personality that is feeling threatened or is not integrated, it tends to dominate and want to be dominant and not to integrate and see others as equals or others as peers or others as, if you like, fractals of the one life. Just as we said with essential divinity, if the spark of the creator resides in each single person, then when I meet you on the street and when I meet anyone on the street, I'm looking at another aspect of the divine being manifest. Now, each person we meet is at a different stage of evolution, of a different stage of their capacity to express what we all share. So on the inside, at the level of spirit, we are equal. The difference is we find ourselves at different stages of our capacity to express that which is inside. And there are certain nations that are more harmonious and more at peace than others at the moment, and other nations that are struggling. So as we go through today, we're not looking to point fingers. We're looking to understand. Because what is playing out on the world stage is a huge psychodrama. What plays out each day in my life is a psychodrama. It's the soul creating these lessons, these situations for me to heal, to learn, and to serve. So we are actors on a stage. And this psychodrama is played out at these different levels. And what we're witnessing right now is the psychodrama being played out on the stage. And the protagonists, the main actors on the stage at the moment, Russia, Ukraine, and round about playing other parts, members of Europe, United States, etc. So if we see it as the outworking of this deep desire to find this point of synthesis, there is a statement in the Ageless Wisdom teachings that says synthesis is. It's a pre-existing state of unity. It's like unanimity. But in order for it to manifest on Earth, we have to create a unified field. So the phrase is synthesis is, and unity must be created. So the must be created is up to us to create the conditions in which that which is can show up in time and space, just as it's our task to create in our personality the conditions that allow that which is, the soul, to show up in its fullness. So at one level, this is incredibly simple. And at the level of the incarnated self, I mean, it's tough. It's not an easy ride. And yet, this is our dharma and our karma that we're working out together, individually, nationally, and globally. So let's have a look at what it means for each nation to have a soul. And we'll look at this in a couple of different ways. Let's start with this image. And I usually mention that these images were created 45 years ago for an esoteric philosophy course that a good friend of mine, Francois, and I taught at the Findhorn community in 1975 in Scotland. So I've called it folk soul, but it could be just the national soul. The national soul of each nation contains the destiny and qualities of its people. This is its promise. And the only way it can express that is by creating a personality. The personality of a nation or of a culture is a collective attempt to express the essential nature of its perceived identity. And we do this through art, religion, politics, do it through science, do it through all the different avenues of life. So when a nation is really expressing its soul, you get a golden age of that nation, whether it be Greece, whether it be China, whether, if you look back in history, there were these golden ages when the soul of a nation or of a culture was glowing and shining. So let's move to the next in this series. So the problem arises whenever a higher common purpose is missing among peoples and nations, when we've got nothing in common. Then mistrust and fear turn cultural differences into threats, and threats are turned into acts of war. You know, it's a descending spiral, unfortunately. And once again, I'm not referencing any particular nation at present, because this war is going on inside each one of us. This battle, this struggle for wholeness. So whenever a higher common purpose is missing amongst people and nations, then mistrust and fear, then cultural differences turn into threats, and threats into war. So let's just bear that in mind. It's worth repeating. That's what we've got to avoid. And we're actually in the throes of that at the moment. So let's look at the next image. And you can look upon this as you as well as an individual. When a nation does not respect others, nor understands its place within the human family, there is a danger that it will seek to impose its identity like a monoculture upon the rest of the world. And so it's very insidious, this, because we can believe that this is good for the world, so that the whole world, it's like our form of democracy should be embraced by everyone because it's what everyone should be doing. And so in the name of doing good, we actually do harm. So the road to hell is paved with good intentions, as they say. So it's really respecting and honoring the gifts that each person and each nation brings, and how do we invite each other to show up with those gifts. So respecting cultural differences as vital pieces of the world picture helps build a more peaceful world and gives an opportunity for the spirit of our common humanity to flower. So we go back to the flowering of this synthesis of nations. And the final slide will show that. So each culture is a colorful gift, a contribution towards the flowering of our humanity. So let's just take a breather and ponder on this now. So there's a lot going on. And what I'd invite each of us to do now is just to take time to check in. Because we may be seeing the news, we may be reading what's happening in the world, and it affects us because we're part of a shared emotional field of our one humanity. So just take a moment just to check in. How are you doing? How is your mental state? Is it poised? Are you troubled? And there's no judgment whether you are or whether you aren't. How are your emotions? Are they swirling? Are the big waves of emotional waters? Is it calm? How's your body? Are you holding tension? As you walk around, you find yourself sort of hunched. And is your breathing deep and free or constricted? So it's good to be aware of the effect of this intense time of transition is having upon us, because we're responsible for taking care of ourselves, and then we take care of each other. And as we take care of each other, we build, if you like, what Martin Luther King was alluding to, we build a beloved community. See, we talk about a beloved community of individuals. What Roberto Assagioli was seeking with a synthesis of nations was a beloved community of nations. It's at the next scale. I think it's important that we hold this vision, and there is creative tension between the vision, the ideal, and the current reality of where things are at the moment. And that tension between ideal and reality can actually help move us like a bowstring. It's taut. And if we use that energy through an act of will, we intend, we choose, we commit ourselves to creating wholeness in the world, in our own lives. We commit ourselves to the supreme synthesis, which is the synthesis of nations. Then the tension can be used positively. If I don't have a higher intent, then the tension just pulls in on itself and causes dis-ease, literally disease, in the individual body, in the collective body. And it causes trauma. And as we've explored before, when I'm traumatized, I'm unable to be present because I'm captured in the past. And if we're not present, we can't be guided by the soul. So all of this goes back to our responsibility of creating wholeness in our own lives, in the lives of our families, our workplaces, our communities, our nations. It's a tough task because the conditioning is such that it's not easy to express our better angels when we get triggered. So we were talking about the nations as having souls. One of the books that we refer to here at Meditation Mount, because part of our lineage comes from it's the Trans-Himalayan lineage, and it's the mystery schools that have been handed down, and we're part of the lineage that flowed through the Theosophical Society. And Roberto Assagioli was a student of the Tibetan, who was the person who dictated to Alice Bailey a lot of the philosophy that is contained in what we call the Blue Books, published by the Lucis Trust. So the series of slides I'm going to present now, a lot of the information is taken from The Destiny of the Nations by Alice Bailey. And I recommend you can go to the Lucis Trust website and you can look at this online. They have online books. And we're just going to touch into this, but if you want to go into more depth to understand, if you like, the psycho-energetic reality that's going on behind the scenes, what we see playing out is one thing, but the energetic patterns that are causing all of this, the causal level, is sometimes hidden from us. So what I'd like to do now is just to gently remove a few veils and to uncover and let us step into, if you like, a deeper understanding of, if you like, the gifts, the tensions, the struggles that each nation may be going through. And we're going to take 5 or 6 different nations and look at them and look at their gifts, look at their challenges, as a way of understanding that nations are living beings. These are entities. They have a destiny, just as individuals we have a destiny. So let's start with the United States of America. So here we have the United States of America, and it says Soul Ray. Now, those of you who are familiar with the rays, the 7 rays, fine, you'll know what I'm speaking about. Those of you who are not familiar with the ray structure, think of it this way. You have the white light coming through a prism, breaking up into these 7 colors. And so these 7 colors are the 7 rays that represent the 7 expressions of the one life. And they are not just colors, they actually are living beings, they're presences. In the esoteric tradition, they're called ray lords, they're actually beings. And in the Bible, they are the 7 spirits standing before the throne of God. So it's been referenced through history. So the rays, each one of us is colored and characterized and qualified in a certain way in order for us to give of our gifts. So let's look at America, the United States of America. Its soul ray is that of the second ray of love wisdom, which means at its heart there is goodness. There is goodness wanting to be revealed. Now, its personality ray is conditioned by this ray of idealism. So it's very idealistic, which is wonderful when it's in its positive aspect, because you know the American dream or whatever it is, this ideal, oh, well, let's go for it. When it is not functioning in its positive, but slips into its negative, it has some other connotations that we'll explore in a minute. And each nation has a gift to give, and it's contained in its spiritual motto. And the motto for the United States of America is, I light the way. You can imagine holding a torch, and it's no accident that the Statue of Liberty is holding a torch. So I light the way doesn't mean I tell everybody else what they should be doing. It means I light the way. I show by example. I lead by example. I light the way through the light of my own life. So if we here in the United States, to the degree that we can create beloved community, to the degree that we can create a more perfect union, we're able to carry out the spiritual destiny of this nation. And underneath each of these slides, I've got some notes. Some of these notes are taken from The Destiny of the Nations, the book I just referenced, and some are just my own personal things thrown in. So don't believe everything to be true. This is just what I'm offering you to ponder on. So when we think of the United States, its task is to develop a loving and compassionate soul-infused persona that upholds the democratic ideal while not sinking into the shadow side of the sixth ray that easily manifests as fanaticism and obstinacy. I'm not going to give examples of this because each of us can reflect ourselves of where have we seen the better angels, the soul of the United States shine forth? And where have we seen some of more the shadow side show up? Without judging it, but just observing and witnessing, knowing that when we see the shadow, then we know it's our task to bring it into the light, to liberate it. Because inside the shadow, once that light is liberated, is a great force for good. So that's the United States. So let's move to another nation. This time, let's move to Russia. But before we do that, let's go back to America, the United States of America. What I don't want to do is rush through this as like some sort of lecture. Let's just stop now and let's take a few moments to tune in to the overlighting soul of the United States of America. Whether you are living in this country or whether you're in another country, it doesn't matter. Just open yourself to connecting through the heart with the soul of the United States of America and get a sense of the gift that it brings, its contribution. So let's come into resonance with the soul of the United States of America. Thank you. And there are groups around the world tuning in each day to the soul of their nation, bringing those qualities through. So this can be done as part of your meditation each day, whatever country you find yourself in, whatever nation you belong to, you can tune into the soul of the nation. So let's move from the United States of America now to Russia. The soul ray of Russia is the seventh ray, and its official title is called the seventh ray of ceremonial order and magic, or order and ceremonial magic. Its personality ray is the sixth ray of idealism. Guess what? That's America's. personality ray. So United States of America and Russia share something in common. They're both idealistic. And as we say, idealism can be very positive because it can lift the spirits. It gives you something to aim to. It's eyes on the prize. Russia has been given the task contained in its spiritual motto, I link two ways. Well, if you look at where it's geographically located, between East and West. So its task is to link East and West energetically. And here in the notes, I've got to develop the inclusive and synthetic quality of the seventh ray that can link East and West, and avoid the shadow of the sixth ray persona, which expresses as fanatical cruelty. Once again, I'm not going to make any comments on this. These are not intended to point fingers. These are simply illustrating the tendencies in different nations, the gifts they bring, and when they show up in their, if you like, in the darker aspects, this is what happens. When you think of the seventh ray of order for the soul, it's this ritualistic, this ceremonial way of going about things. And that was reflected, if you look at the Russian Orthodox Church. It has a lot of ritual. It has a lot of order. Now, of course, these can get crystallized, but in its pure essence, it really is a seventh ray expression of a religious system. So let's now go back into that inner space of stillness, into the heart, and let us bring ourselves into resonance with the overlighting soul of Russia, the gift that this nation, at the deepest level, is seeking to bring. Thank you. So let's move on to the next nation. Great Britain. I happen to be born in England, so I'm part of this construct. It has a second ray soul of love wisdom, but it has a first ray personality. And the first ray is a ray of power, its will. The spiritual motto of Great Britain is I serve. So let's look at the soul ray. Love wisdom, it can be compassionate. And when its personality ray is functioning at the highest aspect, it's what you get what's called British justice, fair play. So the combination of a second ray soul and a first ray personality in its highest aspects comes out as fair play, justice. Now let's look at the notes and look at some of the challenges that Great Britain has faced and probably still faces. So Great Britain, to develop a model of justice and governance based on the second ray quality of love wisdom and avoid the shadow side of the first ray, which can give rise to imperialism, colonialism, and an attitude of superiority. I know this growing up. There was this whole attitude of superiority. In fact, we didn't even have to talk about it because it was obvious that we were superior, so why even mention it? I mean, it was that insidious. It was that ingrained. That's the shadow side. So you can see each nation, when it functions properly, the gifts it brings, social justice. But when it's functioning in its, if you like, its shadow side, it does tend to muddy the waters. So let's take a moment now, once again, by listening through the heart, bringing ourselves into resonant relationship with the overlighting soul of Great Britain, and sensing the gifts that it seeks to bring to our world. Thank you. So let's continue this journey. And Italy. I have a strong affinity with Italy. I spend part of the year there. I'm part of a member of a community in Italy. And it's also said there is a link between particularly England and Italy. And in the books written by the Tibetan, he said many of the current Brits are reincarnated Romans. And so who knows? But there's a resonance here that I feel. Anyway, the soul ray of Italy is idealism. Its personality ray is the ray of harmony through conflict. Harmony through conflict is also that ray that gives birth to art. Its spiritual motto is, I carve the paths. And it's interesting to see that Italy is famous for many things, including like the statues coming out of Michelangelo and others. So they literally carve the paths. They reveal the beauty. They reveal what's hidden inside of matter and bring it forth. So when you think of Italy, you think of beauty, you think of idealism. So the notes I've written here, to continue moving forward and expressing the beauty of ideals through the arts that produced the great Renaissance in Europe, while avoiding an overemphasis and devotion to things of the past. So you can have a glorious past, but if you're hung up in the past, you're not present. And so that's the curse of having a good past, is that if you're not able to detach from it and focus on the present, that then the past is still conditioning the present. And what we want is the soul conditioning the present. So that was Italy. So let us take time just to, in the silence of the heart, connect with the overlighting soul of Italy and sense what it seeks to bring as a gift to the world. Thank you. So we've got a couple more nations just to complete this exploration. So the next nation is China. The soul ray of China is the first ray of power. So there are not many nations that have a first ray soul. Its personality ray is the third ray of intelligence, or the third ray of active intelligence. It's that which brings into form the purpose. And those of you familiar with the rays know that this is a 1 and a 3. There are no soft rays. The soft rays, the 2, 4, 6, are more compassionate and more loving. Look at Italy, 6 and 4. That's why there's a lot of emotions and just warmth when I go to Italy, because it's a 6-4 nation. China is a 1-3. Now there are strengths to 1-3 and there are downsides to 1-3. The spiritual motto for China is, I indicate the way. Now we need to ponder, indicate. That doesn't mean enforce and tell. It means I indicate the way. Sometimes that can mean, like with America, I like the way you do it by example, by living the ideal. So the notes I've written here for China is the task of developing a collective heart that can demonstrate the traits of true leadership in service of the common good and offset the negative tendencies of the first and third rays towards empire building and callousness, which is the lack of compassion, the lack of love. So you look at the history of China over the thousands of years. There have been dynasties. There have been a lot of wonderful philosophy coming out of it. So there are great, each nation has a great gift to give. And yet when it is not integrated and not has an alignment between soul and personality, then what it brings to the table is not its better angels. It brings less than it could do, which is not a judgment, it's just a statement of fact. So let's now take a moment to listen inside the heart and connect with the overlighting soul of China and the gifts that it seeks to bring to our world. Thank you. And there's one more that we're going to explore, and the last one is Germany. The soul ray of Germany is a fourth ray of harmony through conflict. And what you see there is that it's been involved in a lot of wars, like a lot of nations. But when you think of Germany and the arts, you think of Beethoven, you think of all the composers that came out in the last few centuries. It was a source of inspiration, a musical inspiration. And so the note of Germany was sounded through music, because the fourth ray is the ray of the arts. So harmony through conflict. Its personality is first ray of power. Now, when you've got the fourth and the first working at the highest in harmony with each other, you get an incredible gift. When you have the lower aspect of the personality ray distorting the soul ray, you've got problems, which we'll look at in a moment. Its spiritual motto is, I preserve. It's interesting, preserve. So what do you preserve? Are we preserving forms? Are we preserving qualities? Let's just ponder on what it means. And for the German nation, it needs to understand, what is our destiny to preserve? And what I've written here as notes, it says to maintain balance and harmony through periods of conflict that may arise nationally or globally, and to avoid the negative aspect of the first ray that tends to dominate, as witnessed by the rise and fall of the Third Reich. There you see a prime example of what happens when a personality is not integrated and aligned with the soul. It tends to move into, if you like, the worst, quote unquote, behavior associated with that ray. And the worst behavior associated with the first ray of power is dominance, subjugation. And it's also interesting to note, with the fourth ray being this split, out of this conflict you have to find harmony. And that is the secret of synthesis. Out of the conflict between the two, you find this point of synthesis. Harmony is the point of synthesis at the top. Just a number of years ago, the German capital of Berlin was split, was divided. So even its capital was not united. Then it had East Germany and West Germany. And now there is a unified Germany. So you can see all these energies playing out. So let's take a moment now just to complete this cycle of reflection. Go inside the heart. Bring ourselves into resonance with the overlighting soul of Germany and tune in to the gifts that it seeks to bring to the world. Thank you. Okay, so that was a lot. Let's take a moment to digest that. So the reason for wanting to present that is to say that nations are living beings. They're not just political entities, not just geopolitical regions on a map. They actually are the soul of a people. And when you put them all together as a synthesis of nations, you get the expression of the soul of humanity. So at the moment, looking around, it's saying, well, it doesn't look very synthetic at the moment in the world. So what is this period that we're going through, this tumultuous period? And let me offer an image to illustrate what I believe we're in the middle of at the moment. Both individually and as a world, we are facing our own shadow. So let's bring up that image and just ponder on it for a moment. Here it says, the world is now passing through its own shadow. This darkness represents the sum total of all the unresolved thoughts, actions of humanity. And we know that everything we think, say, and do is causal. It creates something to happen. It has an effect. And those effects, we have to make sure cause no harm, so that everything we do is a blessing. If it's not a blessing, then we've got to pick up the pieces at some point, which is what we're doing now. So the shadow is the unredeemed aspects that we've created that need to be brought home, that need to be brought into the light of our own loving heart. And so this is the tough passage we're going through. We're coming face to face with all the shortcomings of our personal life, our personality, individually and as nations. That's why it's a tough time. And yet we have the power to bring light into this situation, the light of our own soul, the light of the soul of our nation, and the light of the soul of our shared humanity. So let me just move to the last image, the last slide. Here it says, Planetary Citizens, a Vision of Synthesis. And this is something I was involved in personally. U Thant, a former Secretary General of the United Nations, gave a speech, and he declared that each person needs to have a second allegiance. In addition to being a citizen of a country or a nation, we are also citizens of the planet. And so when he said that, a good friend of mine, Donald Keyes, who is no longer incarnated, he's working elsewhere on subtle realms, he heard that and he responded to the call and created a non-governmental organization associated with the new UN in New York called Planetary Citizens. And it really attracted me because it summed it all up. The motto of Planetary Citizens was one Earth, one humanity, one destiny. And that, if you like, reflects what Roberto Assagioli was talking about in his vision of the synthesis of nations. One Earth, one humanity, one destiny. So let me say a few words in closing. So it's one thing to have one world, one humanity, but what if our humanity is not connected with the rest of the planet? What if we are not in resonant relationship with all the other realms of nature, both visible and invisible? Then we're still separate. So we can be separate as individuals, we can be separate as nations, we can also be separate as a species. We can be speciesist in our thinking. And that's why I'm inviting myself and others to become Gaians. So, and I've explained before the difference between a human and a Gaian. A Gaian is a human who understands that all of life, the fullness, the full spectrum of the ecosystem of the earth lives inside us, and we live inside it. So we're not just humans walking around on the planet. The planet is a living entity that exists inside of us and we exist inside of it. That for me is the next level of wholeness, the next level of synthesis. After the synthesis of nations, we move into the synthesis of our earth, where all of its realms come together in one wholeness. And when that happens, then the light of the soul of Gaia can shine forth, and Earth can become, as destined to be, a sacred planet. And a sacred planet simply means that it is able to shine the light of its soul and be a contributor to the solar family, etc., etc. So I'd like to bring this to a close now. As I say, we don't know where we're going in this, how long it will take, and it's taken an hour this time. Sometimes it takes 40 minutes. But I do want us to close this time together by focusing on our ability to create peace. So let us stand together inside the chalice of the group heart that we wove together at the beginning of our broadcast. And inside that chalice, we stand and we hold in our imagination and in the loving kindness of our heart, we hold the vision of the synthesis of nations, the souls of each nation, not only shining forth, but joining together as the many facets of the soul of the one humanity. So let us come into resonance with the overlighting soul of our one humanity. Knowing that energy follows thought, let us visualize, see the outworking of this in time and space. See nation turning to nation in love, joining nation to nation to nation, heart to heart to heart, to form the beloved community of the one human family. So be it. Thank you, everyone. So may the light of our own souls and of the soul of our shared humanity guide us through these times of darkness. And may the energy of synthesis help with the integration of the fractured body of our humanity. And may peace prevail on earth. Thank you so much for being part of this broadcast, for your presence, your participation. And so we bid you farewell from Meditation Mount, and we'll see you next month. Blessings to all beings.